Welcome again to my channel. This is Trev from Trevessence, and this morning we are going to continue the reading of Spare by Prince Harry. For those of you who have been following me read this book, I hope you have been enjoying it as much as I have been enjoying reading it with you, for us, to us. It is my absolute pleasure, my friends. And today, as we continue, we are now about halfway through the book, actually. We are on to page 229, chapter 65 of part 2. Angola. I traveled to that war-torn country, an official visit, and went specifically to several places where daily life had been poisoned by landmines, including one town believed to be the most heavily mined place in all of Africa. August 2013. I wore the same protective gear my mother had worn when she visited Angola on her historic trip. I even worked with the same charity that had invited her, Halo Trust. I was deeply frustrated to learn from the charity's executives and field workers that the job she had spotlighted, indeed, the entire global crusade my mother had helped launch, was now stalled. Lack of resources, lack of resolve. This had been Mommy's most passionate cause at the end. She had gone to Bos- she had gone to Bosnia 3 weeks before she had gone to Paris in August of 1997. Many could still remember her walking alone into a live minefield, detonating a mine via remote control, announcing bravely, "One down, 17 million to go." Her vision of a world rid of landmines seemed within reach back then. Now the world was going backwards. Taking up her cause, detonating a mine myself, made me feel closer to her and gave me strength and hope for a brief moment. But after all, I felt that I was walking each day through a psychological, emotional minefield. I never knew when the next explosion of panic might be. Upon returning to Britain, I did another dive into the research. I was desperate to find a cause, a treatment. I even spoke to Pa, took him into my confidence. "Pa, I'm really struggling with panic attacks and anxiety." He sent me to a doctor, which was kind of him, but the doctor was a general practitioner with no knowledge or any new ideas. He wanted to give me pills. I didn't want to take pills, not until I'd exhausted other remedies, including homeopathic ones. In my research, I came across many people recommending magnesium, which was said to have a calming effect. True, it did, but in large quantities, it also had unpleasant side effects, loosened the bowels, which I learned the hard way at a mate's wedding. Over dinner one night at Highgrove, Pa and I spoke at some length about what I had been suffering. I gave him the particulars, told him story after story. Towards the end of the meal, he looked down at his plate and said softly, "I suppose it's my fault. I should have got you the help you needed years ago." I assumed him, I assured him that it wasn't his fault, but I appreciated the apology. As autumn neared, my anxiety was heightened, I think, by my impending birthday, the last of my 20s, dregs of my youth, I thought. I was beset by all the traditional doubts and fears, asked myself all the basic questions people ask when they get older. Who am I? Where am I going? Normal, I told myself, except that the press was abnormally echoing my self-questioning. "Prince Harry, why won't he marry?" They dredged up every relationship I'd ever had, every girl I'd ever been seen with, put it all into a blender, hired experts, aka quacks, to try to make sense of it. Books about me dived into my love life, homed in, homed in on each romantic failure and near misses. I seem to recall one detailing my flirtation with Cameron Diaz. Harry just couldn't see himself with her, the author reported. Indeed, I couldn't, since we had never met. Boy, the media is something, you know. The media is really something else. I was never within 50 meters of Miss Diaz. Further proof that if you like reading pure bullocks, then royal biographies are just your thing. But here we are, reading Harry's book. Okay, bullocks or not, we are reading it. Let's continue. Behind all this hand wringing about me was something more substantive than tittle tattle. It went to the whole underpinning of the monarchy, which was based on marriage. The great controversies about kings and queens going back centuries generally centered on whom they married and whom they didn't, and the children who issued from their unions. You weren't a fully vested member of the royal family, indeed a true human being, until you were wed. No coincidences that no coincidence that Granny, head of the state of 16 countries, started every speech. My husband and I, when Willie and Kate married, they became the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. But more importantly, they became a household, and as much were entitled to more staff, more cars, bigger home, grander office, extra resources, engraved letterheads. I didn't care about such perks, but I did care about respect. As a confirmed bachelor, I was an outsider, a non person within my own family. If I wanted that to change, I had to get hitched. That simple. All of which made my 29th birthday a complex milestone, and some days a complex migraine. I shuddered to think of how I might feel on the next birthday, 30, truly over the hill, to say nothing of the inheritance it would trigger. Upon reaching 30, I'd receive a large sum left to me by my mummy. I scolded myself for being gloomy about that. Most people would kill to inherit money. To me, however, it was another reminder of her absence, another sign of the void she had left, which pounds and euros could never fill. The best thing, I decided, was to get away from birthdays, get away from everything. I decided to mark the anniversary of my arrival on Earth by traveling to its end. I'd already been to the North Pole. Now I'd walk to the South. Another trek in the company of walking with the wounded. People warned me that the South Pole was even colder than the North. I laughed. How could that be possible? I'd already frozen my penis, mate. Wasn't that the very definition of worst case scenario? Also, this time I'd know how to take proper precautions, snugger underwear, more padding, etc. Better yet, one very close mate hired a seamstress to make me a bespoke cock cushion. Oh my God. All right, a bespoke cock cushion. Square, supportive. It was sewn from pieces of the softest fleece. Okay. It was sewn from pieces of the softest fleece, and enough said. Let's move on to chapter 66. Sorry, it's too much right now. Just too much. Thank you all for being here, guys. Hit that like button and share out the live so that others can come in. We're going to be here for just about an hour as I read the book Spare by Prince Harry. We are now on to chapter 66 in part 2. In between preparations for the assault on the pole, I sat down with my new private secretary, Ed Lane Fox, whom we all called Elf. November 2013. A one time captain in the household cavalry, Elf was trim, smart, sleek. He often reminded people of Willie, but that was down to his hairline more than his personality. He reminded me less of my older brother than of a racing dog, like a greyhound. He wouldn't ever stop. He had chased that rabbit to the end of time. In other words, he was wholly dedicated to the cause, whatever it might be at any given moment. His greatest gift, though, might have been his knack for seeing to the heart of things, for sizing up and simplifying situations and problems, which made him the perfect man to help enact this ambitious idea of an international warrior games. Now that some of the money was in hand, Elf advised next order of business was finding someone with the uncommon organization skills, the social and political connections to take on a job this size. He knew of just the man, Sir Keith Mills. Of course, I said. Sir Keith had organized the 2012 Olympics in London, which had been such a smash. Indeed, who else could there be? Let's invite Sir Keith to Kensington Palace for a cup of tea. Chapter 67. I could build a scale replica of that sitting room. Two big windows, small red sofa, chandelier shining softly on an oil painting of a horse. I'd been there for meetings before, but when I walked in that day, I felt that this would be the setting for one of the more crucial meetings of my life, and every detail of the scene impressed itself on me. I tried to stay calm as I pointed Sir Keith to a chair and asked how he took his tea. After a few minutes of chit chat, I made my pitch. Sir Keith listened respectfully, rapture eyed. But when I had finished, he ummed and hawed. All sounded very wonderful, he said, but he was semi retired, trying to cut back on projects. He wanted to streamline his life, focus on his passions, chiefly sailing, America's Cup, and so forth. In fact, he was scheduled to begin a holiday the very next day. How to talk to a man who is just hours away from starting a holiday into rolling up his sleeves and taking on an impossible project? There's no way, I thought. But the whole point of these games was never give up. So I kept on. I went at him and at him and at him some more and told him about the soldiers I had met, their stories, and also a bit of mine. One of the first and fullest accounts I'd ever given anyone of my time at war. Slowly, I could see that my passion, my enthusiasm, were making dents in Sir Keith's defenses. Brow forward, he said, "Well, who have you got so far on this project?" I looked at Elf. Elf looked at me. "That's the beauty of it, Sir Keith. You see, you are the first." He chuckled. "Clever, very clever, Harry." "No, no, no, really. You can get the band back together if you wish. Hire anyone you want." Despite the overt and obvious salesmanship, there was a great deal of truth in what I was saying. We hadn't yet managed to trick anyone else into joining us, so he'd have carte blanche. Carte blanche. That's the first throw, whatever that means. I think it's French. I don't speak French. I speak Creole, like Haitian Creole, but definitely not French. So I don't pronounce these words properly. Carte blanche, I think. He could organize a staff however he wished, bring on every single person who had helped him pull off such a successful Olympics. He nodded. "When are you thinking of doing this?" "September." "What? September? You mean 10 months from now?" "Yes." "No way." Has to be. I wanted the games to coincide with the centenary commemorations of the First World War. I felt that connection was vital. He sighed, promised to consider it. I knew what that meant. Chapter 68. Welcome, guys. Welcome into the live. I sincerely appreciate you all for coming. I thank you all, those of you who are dedicated to coming here. and listening to the reading of the book Fair, written by Prince Harry. We are moving along. We are now on chapter 68 of part 2, and that is page 233 of 410. So we are well on our way to finishing this book by the end of the month. Thank you all so much for staying with me. Chapter 68. A few weeks later, I flew to the Antarctic, landed at a research station called Novolasarveskaya. All right, that's about that. A tiny village of huts and porta cabins. The few hardy souls living there were fabulous hosts. They housed me, fed me, their soups were amazing. I couldn't get enough. Maybe because it was 35 degrees below zero. More piping hot chicken noodle, Harry. Yes, please. The team and I spent a week or two carb loading, gearing up, and of course, and of course, squaffing vodka. At last, one blaring morning, off we went. We climbed into a plane, flew up to the ice shelf, stopped to refuel. The plane landed on a field of solid, flat, white ice, as in a dream. There was nothing to be seen in any direction but a handful of giant fuel barrels. We taxied over to them and got out while the pilots filled up. The silence was holy. Not a bird, not a car, not a tree. But it was only one part of the larger, all encompassing nothingness. No smells, no wind, no sharp corners or distinct features to distract from the endless and insanely beautiful vista. I walked off to be by myself for a few moments. I'd never been anywhere half so peaceful. Hey Sunji, what's up? How are you doing, my love? I'd never been anywhere half so peaceful. Overcome with joy, I did a handstand. Months and months of anxiety passed away for a few minutes. We got back onto the plane, flew to the starting point of the trek. As we began walking, at last I remembered, oh yeah, my toe is broken. Just recently, in fact, a boys' weekend in Norfolk, we drank and smoked and partied till dawn, and then, while trying to reassemble one of the rooms we had rearranged, I dropped a heavy chair with brass wheels onto my foot. Silly injury, but debilitating. I could barely walk. No matter, I was determined not to let the team down. So he went to the North Pole, got got frostbitten on his tudges, on his tudger, and now he's at the South Pole and he has a broken toe. Very clumsy and injury prone, Harry. Let us continue. He said I could barely walk. No matter, I was determined not to let the team down. Somehow I kept pace with my fellow walkers, 9 miles each day, pulling a sledge that weighed about 200 pounds. It was hard for everyone to gain traction on the snow, but for me, the particular challenge was the slick, undulating patches carved out by the wind. Sastrugi, that was the Norwegian word for these patches. Trekking across Sastrugi with a broken toe? Maybe this could be an event at the International Warrior Games, I thought. But any time I felt tempted to complain about my toe, my fatigue, anything, I had only to make one glance at my fellow walkers. I was directly behind a Scottish soldier named Duncan who had no legs. Behind me, an American soldier named Ivan who was blind. So not one whinge would be heard from me, I vowed. Also, an experienced polar guide had advised me before I left Britain to use this trek to clean the hard drive. That was his phrase. Use the repetitive motion, he said. Use the biting cold. Use that nothingness, that landscape unique blankness to narrow your focus until your mind falls into a trance. It, w- it will become medication. I followed his advice to the letter. I told myself to stay present, be the snow, be the cold, be each step, and it worked. I fell into the loveliest trance, and even when my thoughts were dark, I was able to stare at them, watch them float away. Sometimes it would happen that I'd watch my thoughts connect to other thoughts, and all at once the whole chain of thoughts would make some sense. For instance, I considered all of the previous challenging walks of my life, the North Pole, the army exercising, following Mommy's coffin to the grave. And while the memories were painful, they also provided continuity, structure, a kind of narrative spine that I'd never suspected. Life was one long walk. It made sense. It was wonderful. All was interdependent and interconnected. Then came the disease. The South Pole, counterintuitively, is high above sea level, roughly 3,000 meters, and so altitude sickness is a real danger. One walk had already been taken off our trek. Now I understood why. The feeling started slowly, and I brushed it off. Then it knocked me flat, head spins, followed by crushing migraine, pressure building in both lobes of my brain. I didn't want to stop, but it wasn't up to me. My body said, thanks, this is where we get off. The knees went, the upper torso followed. I hit the snow like a pile of rocks. Medics pitched a tent, laid me flat, gave me some sort of anti migraine injection in my buttocks, I think. Steroids, I heard them say. When I came to, I felt semi revived. I caught up with the group, searched for a way back into the trance. Be the cold, be the snow. As we neared the pole, we were all instinct, all elated. We could see it there, just over there. Through our ice crushed eyelashes, we began running to it. Stop! The guides told us it was time to make camp. Camp? What the? But the finish line's just there. You are not allowed to camp at the pole. So we'll all have to camp here tonight. Then strike out for the pole in the morning. Camped in the shadow of the pole, none of us could sleep. We were too excited, and thus we had a party. There was some drinking, horseplay. The underside of the world rang with our giggles. Finally, at finally, at first light, December 13th of 2013, we took off, stormed the pole. On, on or near the exact spot was a huge circle of flags representing the 12 signatories of the Arctic Treaty. We stood before the flags, exhausted, relieved, disoriented. Why is there a Union Jack? Why is there a Union Jack on the coffin? When we hugged, some press accounts, guys, I'm reading and I'm thinking at the same time. When we hugged, some press accounts say one of the soldiers took off his leg and we used it as a tankard to guzzle champagne, which sounds right, but I can't remember. I've drunk booze out of multiple prosthetic legs in my life, and I can't swear that was one of the times. Beyond the flags stood a huge building, one of the ugliest I had ever seen, a windowless box built by the Americans as a research center. The architect who designed this monstrosity, I thought, must have been filled with hate for his fellow humans, for the planet, for the pole. It broke my heart to see a thing so unsightly dominate a land so otherwise pristine. Nevertheless, along with everyone else, I hurried inside the ugly building to warm up, have a pee, drink some cocoa. There was a huge cafe and we were all starving. Sorry, we were told, cafe is closed. Would you like a glass of water? Water? Oh, okay. Each of us was handed a glass, then a souvenir, a test tube with a tiny cork in the top. On the side was a printed label, cleanest air in the world. That's funny. A test tube of the cleanest air in the world. Now we're on to chapter 69. Welcome into the channel, guys. If you are new here, a very, very special welcome to you. And if you are a returning traveler, I want to say thank you for your continued support as we continue to read the book Spare, written by Prince Harry. Chapter 69. I went directly from the South Pole to Sandringham, Christmas with the family. Hotel Granny was Hotel Granny was full that year, overrun by family, so I was given a mini room in a narrow back corridor among the offices of palace staff. I'd never stayed there before. I'd rarely even set foot there before. Not so unusual. All Granny's residences are vast. It would take a lifetime to see every nook and cranny. I like the notion of seeing and exploring uncharted territory. I was a grizzly grizzled polar explorer after all. But I also felt a bit unappreciated, a bit unloved, relegated to the hinterlands. I told myself to make the best of it, use this time to protect the serenity I'd achieved at the pole. My hard drive was cleaned. Alas, my family at that moment was infected with some very scary malware. It was largely to do with the court circular that annu- why am I reading ahead of what I'm saying? Anyway, it was largely to do with the court circular, that annual record of official engagements done by each member of the royal family in the preceding calendar year. Sinister document. At the end of the year, when all the numbers got tallied, comparisons would be made in the press. Ha, that's one busy. That this one's busier than that one. Oh, this one's a lazy shit. The court circular was an ancient document, but it had lately morphed into a circular firing squad. It didn't create the feelings of competitiveness that ran in my family, but it amplified them, weaponized them. Though none of us ever spoke about the court circular document directly or mentioned it by name, that only created more tension under the surface, which built invisibly as the last day of the calendar year approached. Certain family members had become obsessed, feverishly striving to have the highest number of official engagements recorded in the circular each year, no matter what, and they'd succeeded largely by including things that weren't, strictly speaking, engagements, recording public interactions that were mere blips, the kinds of things Willie and I wouldn't dream of including, which was essentially why the court circular was a joke. It was all self reported, all subjective. 9 private visits with veterans, helping with their mental health, 0 points. Flying via helicopter to cut a ribbon at a horse farm, winner. But the main reason the court circular was a joke, a scam, was that none of us was deciding in a vacuum how much work to do. Granny or Pa decided by way of how much support or money they allocated to our work. Money determined all. In the case of Willie and me, Pa was the sole decider. It was he alone who controlled our funds. We could only do what we could do with whatever resources and budget he gave to us. To be publicly flogged for how much Pa permitted us to do, that felt grossly unfair, rigged, even. Maybe the stress around all of this stuff stemmed from the overarching stress about the monarchy itself. The family was feeling the tremors of global change, hearing the cries of critics who said the monarchy was outdated, costly. The family tolerated, even leaned into the nonsense of the court circular for the same reason it accepted the ravages and depredations of the press. Fear. Fear of the public, fear of the future, fear of the day the nation would say, okay, shut it down. So, by the time Christmas Eve of 2013 rolled around, I was actually quite content in my back corridor, in my micro room, looking at photos of the South Pole on my iPad, staring at my little test tube, cleanest air in the world. I took off the cork stopper, downed it in one. Ah, welcome into the live, guys. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope I'm doing justice to Harry's book, Spare. I hope so. Talk to me in the comments, guys. Talk to me in the comments. And also, I must say thank you all for last night. Last night we had a little Q&A about the book, and I enjoyed it. I want to say thanks to those of you who were here, those of you who participated, and those of you who just stood by and looked on. I appreciate each and every one of you. I thank you all so much. Now we are on to chapter 70. I moved out of I moved out of the Badger set into Nottingham Cottage, aka Notcott. Willie and Kate had been living there, but they had outgrown it. After moving into Princess Margaret's old place just across the way, they had passed me their keys. It felt good to be out of the Badger set, but even better to be just across the way from Willie and Kate. I looked forward to popping in all the time. Look, it's Uncle Harry. Hello! Just thought I'd stop by, holding a bottle of wine and an armful of kiddie presents, dropping to the floor and wrestling with little George. Will you stay for supper, Harold? Love to, but it didn't work out that way. They were half a football pitch away, but beyond the stone court, so close that I could see their nanny pass by all the time with the pram, and I could hear their elaborate renovations. I assumed they'd have me over any minute now. One day. But day after day, it didn't happen. I get it, I thought. They're busy building a family. Or maybe they don't want a third wheel. Maybe if I get married, things will be different. They both mentioned pointedly, repeatedly, how much they liked Cressida. Chapter 71. March 2014. A concert at Wembley Arena. Walking on stage, I suffered the typical panic attack. I made my way to the center, clenched my fist, spat out the speech. There were 14,000 young faces before me, gathered for We Day. Maybe I'd have been less nervous if I'd concentrated more on them, but I was having a proper me day, thinking about the last time I'd given a speech under this roof. 10th anniversary of Mommy's death. I'd been nervous then too, but not like this. I hurried off, wiping the shine from my face and staggering up to my seat to join Cress. She saw me and blanched. You okay? Yeah, but she knew. We watched the other speakers. That is, she watched. I tried to catch my breath. The next morning, our photo was in all the papers and splashed online. Someone tipped off the royal correspondence to where we were sitting, and at long last we were outed. After nearly 2 years of secretly dating, we were revealed to be a couple. Odd, we said, that it should be such big news. We had been photographed before, skiing in Verbier, I don't know, someplace beginning with the letter V. Verbier. But these photos landed directly, maybe because this was the first time she had joined me at a royal engagement. As a result, we became less clandestine, and that felt like a plus. Several days later, We went to Twickenham, watched English play Wales, watched England play Wales, got packed, and didn't even bother to talk about it. Soon after, we left on a skiing holiday with friends to Kazakhstan, got packed again, and didn't even know. We were too distracted. Skiing was so sacred for us, so symbolic, especially after our previous skiing holiday in Switzerland, when she had miraculously opened me up. Oh my God. It happened late one night after a long day on the slopes and the fun time at Apresky. She had gone back to my cousin's chalet. She had gone back to my cousin's chalet, which was where where we were staying, and Cress was washing her face, brushing her teeth, while I was sitting on the edge of the bath. We were talking about nothing special, as I recall, but suddenly she asked about my mother. Unique, a girlfriend asking about my mother. But it was also the way she asked. Her tone was just the right blend of curiosity and compassion. The way she reacted to my answer was just right too. Surprised, concerned, with no judgment. Maybe other factors were at play as well. The alchemy of physical fatigue and Swiss hospitality, the fresh air and alcohol. Maybe it was the softly falling snow outside the windows, or the culminating of 17 years of suppressed grief. Maybe it was maturity. Whatever the reason or combination of reasons, I answered her straight out and then started to cry. I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm crying," and saying to her, "This is the first time I've." Cressida leaned towards me. "What do you mean, first time?" "This is the first time I've been able to cry about my mom since the burial." Wiping my eyes, I thanked her. She was the first person to help me across that barrier, to help me unleash the tears. It was cathartic. It accelerated our bond and added an element rare in past relationships, immense gratitude. I was indebted to Cress, and that was the reason why, when we got home from Kazakhstan, I felt so miserable because at some point during that ski trip, I had realized that we weren't a match. Oh my, oh my. I just knew. Cress, I think, knew as well. There was massive affection, deep and abiding loyalty, but not love everlasting. She was always clear about not wanting to take on the stresses of being a royal, and I was never sure I wanted to ask her to do so. And this unalterable fact, though it had been lurking in the background for some time, became undeniable on those Kazakh slopes. Suddenly it was clear. This can't work. How odd, I thought. Every time we go skiing, a revelation. Wow. Wow. I don't know. Some people get that intuition, like, at this juncture of a relationship, I know it's not going anywhere. And one thing that I found to be extremely profound as I read this book more and more is is the understanding that Harry sort of is it's like he knows when a relationship is not going to work. Or is it the way it is conveyed in the story? I'm not sure. But I just get the sense that he determines that this is not going to work, and rather than beating the dead horse, he is able to just cut it off like right away. Remember, it was the same thing with Chelsea. He kept talking to himself about maybe he didn't want the relationship to work because Chelsea wasn't keen on being papped by the paparazzis and the responsibilities of royal life, and so she wasn't too keen on that. And so he sort of knew when to cut it off. And the same thing with Flea, and the same thing now with Cressida. And it just seems like he just was searching for somebody to fill that royal gap. Because remember, he talks about the loyalty to his family and how you are treated if you are not married, and how you must marry the right person that the royal family will accept and appreciate. So I guess he's just sort of searching for that right person. Let us continue. The day after we got home from Kazakhstan, I found a mate who was also close with Cress. I told him about my feelings and asked for advice. Without hesitation, the mate said that if it was done, it must be done quickly. So I drove straight over to see Cress. She was staying with a friend. Her bedroom was on the ground floor, windows looking onto the street. I heard cars and people going by as I sat gingerly on the bed and told her my thinking. She nodded. None of it seemed to surprise her. These things had been on her mind as well. I've learned so much from you, Cress. She nodded. She looked at the floor, tears running down her cheeks. Damn, I thought. She helped me cry, and now I'm leaving her in tears. Boy, guys, life can be so complex. So complex, I tell you. Chapter 72. My mate, Guy, was getting married. I wasn't exactly in the mood for a wedding, but it was Guy, all round good bloke. Long time mate of Willie and me. I loved him and owed him. He had been dragged through the muck by the press more than once in my name. The wedding was in America, in the deep South. My arrival there set off a torrent of talk about what else? Vegas. I thought, after all this time, really, is my beer ass that memorable? So be it, I told myself. Let them bang on about Vegas. I'm going to focus on Guy's big day. On the way to Guy's stag party, a group of us stopped off in Miami. We ate a fabulous meal, visited a few clubs, danced until well past midnight, toasted Guy. Next day we all flew to Tennessee. I remember, despite the crowded wedding schedule, finding time to tour Graceland, erstwhile home of Elvis Presley. Actually, he actually bought it for his mother. Everyone kept saying, well, well, so this is where the king lived. Who? The king, Elvis Presley. Oh, the king. Right. People variously call the house a castle, a mansion, a palace, but it reminded me of the Badger set, dark, claustrophobic. I walked around saying, the king lived here. You say? Really? I stood in one tiny room with loud furniture and shag carpet and thought, the king's interior designer must have been on acid. In horror of, in honor of Elvis, every member of the bridal party wore blue suede shoes. At the reception, there was much kicking up of those shoes. Young British men and women dancing drunkenly and singing gleefully without pitch or rhythm. It was riotous, ridiculous, and Guy looked happier than I've ever seen him. He had always been cast on our sidekick, but not now. He and his bride were the stars of this show, the center of attention, and my old mate was rightfully savoring it. It made me so happy to see him so happy, though now and then, as couples paired off, as lovers drifted into corners, or swayed to songs by Beyonce and Adele, I'd wander over to the bar and think, when it's going to be my turn. The one person who might want it most to be married, to have a family, and it's never going to happen. More than a little petulantly, I thought, it's just not fair of the universe. All right, so Harry was just about 30 and he wasn't yet married, but he was thinking about it. But it seemed like nobody up until then fit the bill. All right, let us continue. I'm anxious, guys. I don't know about you. I'm anxious to get to the part where he meets Megan. I am anxious. Now we are on to chapter 73. Chapter 73. But the universe was just getting warmed up. Soon after I got back to Britain, the main villain in the phone hacking scandal, Rehabber Cooks, was acquitted at trial, June 2014. The evidence had been strong, everybody said. Not strong enough, the jurors said. They believed what Rehabber Cooks testified on the witness stand, even though she had strained credulity. Even though she had strained credulity. No, she had abused credulity. She had treated credulity as she had once treated a red-headed teenage royal. Likewise, her husband. He had been caught on video throwing black bin liners full of computers and thumb drives and other personal belongings, including his porn collection, into a garage dustbin just hours before the police searched their place. But he swore it was all a silly coincidence. So, no evidence tampering here, saith the justice system. Carry on. As we were. I never believed what I read, but now I truly couldn't believe what I was reading. They were letting this woman walk, and there was no furor from the general public. Did people not realize that this was about more than privacy, more than public safety, more than the royal family? Indeed, the phone hacking case first broke wide open because of poor Millie Dowler, a teenager who had been abducted and murdered. Rehabber Cook's minions broke into Millie's phone after she had been declared missing. They had violated her parents at a moment of their worst pain and given them false hope that their little girl might be alive because her messages were listened to. Little did the parents know that it was Team Rehabber Cook listening. If these journalists were villainous enough to go after the Dowlers in their darkest hour and get away with it, was anyone else safe? Did people not care? They didn't. They did not care. My faith in the whole system took a serious hit when that woman got off scotch-free. I needed a reset, a faith refresher. So I went where I always went, the Okonvangwa, to spend a few restorative days with Tej and Mike. It helped. But when I returned to Britain, I barricaded myself into Notcott. Chapter 74. I didn't do I didn't go out much at all. Maybe a dinner party now and then, maybe the odd house party. Sometimes I duck in and out of a club, but it wasn't worth it. When I went out, it was always the same seat. Oh my God, that is so funny. That is so funny. The battery is low, all right. I don't come home with the people's Vastera in my pocket. Now it's talking about the battery is low. Anywho, let us continue. I'll take it back when I get back to work today. Chapter 74. Let's start over. I didn't go out much at all. Maybe a dinner party now and then. Maybe the odd house party. Sometimes I duck in and out of a club, but it wasn't worth it. When I went out, it was always the same scene. Pops here, pops there, pops everywhere. Groundhog Day. The dubious pleasure of a night out was never worth the pain. But then I'd think, how am I going to meet someone if I don't go out? So I tried again, and Groundhog Day. One night, leaving a club, I saw two men come racing around a corner. They were headed straight for me, and one had a hand on his hip. Someone yelled, "Gun!" I thought, everyone, we had a good run. Billy the Rock leaped forward, hand on his gun, and nearly shot the two men. But it was just Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. They didn't have guns, and I don't know what one of them was reaching for on his hip. But Billy led them and screamed into his face. But Billy held him and screamed into his face. How many times do we have to tell you? You are going to get someone fucking killed. They didn't care. They did not care. Chapter 75. Thank you for coming, guys. Thank you so much for listening. It is my pleasure sharing Spare with us. It is my absolute pleasure reading this book and have you all listening. I enjoy it and I hope you are enjoying it too. We are on to chapter 75 of part 2. And we are now more than halfway through the book. Actually, we have read 60% of the book already. Let's continue. The Tower of London. With Will and Kate, August 2014. The reason for our visit was an art installation. Across the dry moat were spread tens of thousands of bright red ceramic poppies. Ultimately, the plan was for 888 to 888,246 of these puppies to be spread there, one for each Commonwealth soldier who had died in the Great War. The 100th anniversary of the war's start was being marked all over Europe. Apart from its extraordinary beauty, the art installation was a different way of visualizing war's carnage. Indeed, of visualizing death itself. I felt stricken. All those lives, all those families. It didn't help that this visit to the tower was also 3 weeks before the anniversary of Mommy's death, or that I always connected her to the Great War because her birthday, July 1st, the start of the Battle of the Somme, was the war's bloodiest day, the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow. All these things were converging in my heart and mind outside the tower as someone stepped forward, handed me a puppy, and told me to place it. The artist behind the installation wanted every puppy to be placed by a living person. Thousands of volunteers had pitched in thus far. Willie and Kate were also handed puppies and told to place them on any spot of their choosing. After we had finished, all three of us stood back, lost in our private thoughts. I believe it was just then that the constable of the tower appeared, greeted us, told us about the puppy, how it had come to being the British symbol of war. It was the only thing that bloomed on those blood-soaked battlefields. Once the constable, who was none other than General Donat. Ah, the man who had sent me back to war. Truly, everything was converging. He asked if we'd like a quick tour of the tower. Course, we said. We walked up and down the tower's steep stairs, peered into its dark corners, and soon found ourselves before a case of thick glass. Inside were dazzling jewels, including the crown. Holy shit! The crown. The one that had been placed upon Granny's head at her 1953 coronation. For a moment I thought it was also the same crown that sat on Ganga's coffin as it went through the streets. It looked the same, but someone pointed out several key differences. Oh, yes. So this was Granny's crown, and hers alone. And now I remembered her telling me how unbelievably heavy it had been the first time they sat it upon her head. It looked heavy. It also looked magical. The more we stared, the brighter it got. Was that possible? And the glow was seemingly eternal. The jewels did their part, but the crown seemed to possess some inner energy source. Yeah, the African ancestors were shining through it. Uh-huh. That's why it shone so brightly. Anywho, something beyond the sum of its parts, its jeweled band, its golden fleurs de lis, its crisscrossing arch and gleaming cross, and of course its ermine base. You couldn't help but feel that a ghost encountered late at night inside the tower might have a similar glow. I moved my eyes slowly, appreciatively, from the bottom to the top. The crown was a wonder, a, trans- a transcendent and evocative piece of art, not unlike the puppies, but all I could think in that moment was how tragic that it should remain locked up in this tower. Yet another prisoner. Yes, another prisoner of the monarchy. Everything is locked up, everything is locked away, everything is preserved. And sometimes I wonder, even after starting to read this book and hearing of everything being locked up, locked away, if you give if you have ever given a royal a gift, the gift was never used. So if it was perfume, if it was vodka, liquor, a key from your country, anything, it was never used. Instead, it was put in a storage room over there in the palace and kept in this dark storage room like a forever storage. So I guess it's going to be there for eternity. And I wonder if that is where we have inherited this desire to store away, to stock away. Because remember, for those of you who have read history and gone over like African history of our black ancestors from Africa, we lived a day by day kind of life. We never like stored stuff. Our ancestors never stored stuff. You know, all of everything that we owned was like right here for our use. We used it. Only thing we were storing for maybe for spring, maybe for the immediate season that's going to follow, but not for eternity. The things we leave for eternity are the indelible generational ideas that we pass down from generation to generation. But we ain't storing no old clothes, old bottle of gin, old bottle of this and that. No, we live day by day. But here we are now in this generation after being colonized, storing stuff, having so much to store, storing up stuff, keeping it for eternity. For what? Like, why? Why have it if you're not using it? Why keep it? Why not just give it away? Why not just have somebody else use it? What's the point of having something that somebody else can use, but just keeping it just for keepsake, just hoarding stuff? And I think that's just what they do. They hoard the money, they hoard all the riches and everything that they have stolen from other places. Just a bunch of hoarders. But anywho, let us continue. Welcome, guys. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening. My thoughts went another place just now. All right, let us continue. Yet another prisoner. Seems a waste, I said to Willie and Kate, to which I recall they said nothing. Maybe they were looking at that band of ermine, remembering my wedding remarks. Maybe not. Chapter 76. A few weeks later, after more than a year of talking and planning, thinking and worrying, 7,000 fans packed into the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park for the opening ceremony. The Invictus Games were born. It had been decided that the International Warrior Games was a tongue twister, a mouthful. A clever royal marine had then come up a clever royal marine had then come up with this far better alternative. As soon as he suggested it, we all said, "Of course." After the William Ernest Henley poem. Every Brit knew that poem. Many had the first line by heart. Out of the night that covers me. Oh, I don't know that poem. Hold on, let me mark it. That poem written by William Ernest Henley, Out of the Night That Covers Me. All right, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up and let's see. Hold on there, guys. As we read, we learn. Out of the night. Hold on, let me go back here. Out of the night that covers me. Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Let's see if we see this poem here. Okay, here is this poem, guys. All right. Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cry aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds, finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. That is the poem by William Ernest Henley. And that poem seems to have so much of a deeper meaning than the words can convey. But welcome into the live, Winsome. How are you doing, my love? Good to see you, my darling. Hope you're having a fabulous Tuesday morning. Happy Valentine's Day to you all. Those of you who have somebody to celebrate for, to, and with. As for me and myself, in a in 2 minutes, I'm going to go get myself together and go to work. But here we are. I just read that poem by William Ernest Henley, Out of the Night That Covers Me. Now we are going to move right along. And what schoolboy or schoolgirl didn't encounter at least once those sonorous final lines? I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Minutes before my speech at the opening ceremony, I stood in the wings, holding note cards in my hands, which were visibly shaking. Before me, the podium looked like a gallows. I read my cards over and over, while 9 red arrows did a fly past, streaming smoke-colored red, white, and blue. Then Idris Elba read Invictus, maybe as well as anyone ever has. And then Michelle Obama, via satellite, said some eloquent words about the meaning of the games. Finally, she introduced me. Long walk through a red carpeted labyrinth. My cheeks looked red carpeted as well. My smile was frozen, the fight or flight response in full effect. I scolded myself under my breath for being this way. These games were celebrating men and women who had lost limbs, pushed their bodies to the limit and beyond. And here I was, freaking out about a little speech. But it wasn't my fault. Anxiety. By this point, but it wasn't my fault. Anxiety by this point was controlling my body, my life. And this speech, which I believed meant so much to so many, couldn't help but exacerbate my condition. Plus, the producer told me as I walked on stage that we were running behind on time. Oh, great! Something else to think about. Thanks. As I reached the lectern, which I'd personally and carefully positioned, I berated myself because if because it afforded a perfect view of all the competitors. All those trusting, wholesome, expectant faces counted on me. I forced myself to look away, to look at nothing. Hurrying, hyperconscious of the clock, I bleated out, for some of those taking part, this will be a stepping stone to elite sport. But for others, it will mark the end of a chapter in their recovery and the beginning of a new one. I went I went and found my seat down front beside Pa, who put a hand on my shoulder. Well done, darling boy. He was being kind. He knew I'd rushed the speech. For once, I was glad not to hear the raw truth from him. Just on the numbers, Invictus was a hit. 2 million people watched on TV. Thousands filled the arenas for each event. Among the highlights for me was the wheelchair rugby final, Britain versus America. Thousands of fans cheering Britain on to victory in the copper box. Wherever I went that week, people came up to me, shook my hand, told me their stories. Children, parents, grandparents, always with tears in their eyes, told me that these games had restored something they had feared forever lost, the true spirit of a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad. One woman tapped me on the shoulder and told me I'd resurrected her husband's smile. Oh, that smile, she said. I hadn't seen it since he got injured. I knew Invictus would I knew Invictus would do some good in the world. I always knew, but I was caught off guard by this wave of appreciation and gratitude and joy. Then came the emails, thousands and thousands of them, each more moving than the last. I've had a broken back in I've had a broken back for 5 years, but after watching those brave men and women, I've got off the sofa today and I'm ready to begin again. I've been suffering depression since returning from Afghanistan, but this demonstration of human courage and resilience has made me see. At the closing ceremony, moments after I introduced Dave Kroll and the Foo Fighters, a man and woman approached, their young daughter between them. The daughter was wearing a pink hoodie and orange ear defenders. She looked up at me. Thank you for making my daddy again. He had won a gold medal. Just one problem, she said. She couldn't see the Foo Fighters. Oh well, we can't have that. I lifted her onto my shoulders, and together the four of us watched, danced, sang, and celebrated being alive. It was my 30th birthday. Wow, that took me in a moment there, my friends. That's where we're going to stop for today. I want to thank you all so much for listening. I enjoy reading this to you, and I hope you will enjoy listening. It was my absolute pleasure reading this part. This is part, I believe, 12, maybe 12 or 13, somewhere there. But we are halfway, over halfway. Actually, we have already read 61% of the book Spare, written by Prince Harry. And I thank you all for listening. Thank you all for coming in. Thank you all for staying with us. We are going to be continuing the reading of this book every morning until we are done. We have a few more chapters to go, guys. And I want to say thanks again to all the newbies who are coming in or just coming in. When you get the time, go back and listen from the beginning and then catch up. And to everybody who have been here from the time we started this book um, about a week ago, I want to say thank you so much for your unwavering support. But that's going to be it from me for today, my friends. Have a great day. Have a great Valentine's Day. Don't just love your loved ones today, but every day. Sister Winsome and Sister Sunji and whoever else have been here listening, I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Now go ahead, my friends, and have yourselves a fantastic day. Until next time, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. I'll talk to you all later, guys. Have yourselves a great day.